Procurement and Supply. Unit 6. International and e-sourcing content. Section 4. The use of Incoterms and payment systems. In every dialect, there are words which are peculiar to a particular tribe, or there are words in which only a particular group of people can understand and comprehend. Like international sourcing, there are key and technical terms used to ensure smooth flow of transactions. These terms are what we refer to as the Incoterms. So in this section, we are going to look at some uses of Incoterms and payment systems. At the end of the section, we should be able to define and identify the purpose of Incoterms, identify the basic structure of Incoterms, explain the payment mechanisms, identify the dispute resolution techniques. Definition and purpose of Incoterms. The communication difficulties involved in international trade has long been recognized as a problem. The translation and interpretation of contractual terms is of key importance to both the buyers and sellers, since both parties' understanding of contract requirements must be absolutely free from ambiguity in order for a contract to be fulfilled successfully and without dispute. With this in mind, the concept of Incoterms, that's the International Commercial Terms, was introduced by the International Chamber of Commerce in 1936. Incoterms are a series of predefined or standard terms published by the International Chamber of Commerce that is relating to international trade, such that even if both countries or both parties do not share the same understanding, the same language, they can adopt these Incoterms, these international commercial terms, in their contracts for as long as they both understand these international commercial terms, because it's assumed every country knows of these Incoterms and they have the same meaning. So if I draw the contract in my language, probably you are not going to understand. The same way if I do the same thing, you're not going to understand. However, we can both come together and agree to adopt some of these terms, which are standard, have the standard meaning and are predefined, in order to ensure that our contract is free from bias and ambiguity. Both parties understand what they are committing themselves to. It was felt that if the parties concerned in international transaction adopted standard terms, many problem areas could be averted, as all parties would be clear of their areas of risk and responsibility at all stages of transactions, and there would be no ambiguity of law or jurisdiction in the event of a dispute. Incoterms is a set of contractual conditions or terms that can be adopted into international contracts, which are designed to be understood and interpreted on a worldwide basis. The Incoterms are grouped or classified into 4 groups. We have the E terms, the F terms, the C terms, and the D terms. So in simple terms, the Incoterms have terms that start with E. So when we get to the section where we elaborate on the Incoterms, you realize that some terms start with E, some of the terms start with F, some terms start with C, and some terms start with D. So this is basically what was used to group the Incoterms. So if you see any term that starts with E, you group it under E terms. So there are 4 groups of 4 classes of Incoterms. The E terms define duties of the buyers or the seller as: the seller's duty is only to make the goods available at its premises. It may assist with transit, but this is not a requirement. So if we draw up a contract and we decide to use the E terms, both parties are going to understand that the supplier is discharging its part of the contract once it makes the requirement available at the supplier's premises. So I can say, okay, the supplier's premises is the supplier's warehouse. I am making the goods available at my warehouse, and that is done. However, you get the goods from my warehouse to your production unit is probably not my business. The supplier can assist, but it is not a requirement when the E terms are adopted. With the F terms, the seller will undertake all pre-carriage duties, but main carriage arrangements are the responsibility of the buyer. With the C terms, the sellers arrange for the carriage of the goods, but once they are dispatched, it has fulfilled its obligations. So once I get the goods to probably the shipping unit, the airlines or the sea cargo transit people, I've discharged my duties. I am done. I've executed my part of the contract. It's now the buyer's responsibility to make sure the goods get to your production unit. And then the D terms, the seller's obligation extends to delivery of goods at a specified destination. It is therefore liable for damage or loss in transit, insurances in transit, and so on. So the D terms, the supplier is probably going to make sure that where the buyer stated in the contract or agreed for the goods to the destination where the goods are going to. It's the supplier's responsibility to make sure the goods get there. So if it's the it's the supplier's responsibility to make sure the goods get to Ghana, even if the supplier is in, let's say, China, you, the supplier, to make sure the goods get to Ghana successfully. This table here is giving a summary of the Incoterms. So you can see some terms start with the E. We have some terms starting with F, some starting with C, and some starting with the D. So these are the four main classifications or the groupings we saw in the previous slide. So this is only a summary. The first one, which is the EXW, means X works. So with the X works, the buyer collects the goods and the X work price is for the goods alone, free of any delivery charges or insurance. The obligations of the sellers are to place the goods under the contract at the factory gate or other named area in the factory vicinity that will enable the buyer to uplift the goods. The buyer must then make all arrangements to uplift the goods from the premises and ship them to destination at its own risk and expense. If the buyer cannot carry out export formalities, then the FCA, which is the free carrier, may be required. Now we are moving to the FCA, which is the free carrier. This is an F term. And earlier we said that with the F terms, the seller or the supplier will undertake all pre-carriage duties, but main carriage arrangements are the responsibility of the buyer. And then the free carrier, the FCA, is one of these F terms. So let's see what the FCA or the free carrier is also saying. So unlike the FOB, which is the free on board, this term is applicable to all modes of transport to a specified carrier or specific destination. It is particularly relevant for multimodal containerized transport. The seller or the supplier retains responsibility and risk until it has handed the goods over, cleared for export into the charge of the carrier named by the buyer at the named place. The place stipulated by the buyer could be an inland clearance depot, rail or airport terminal, shipping berth, freight agent, warehouse, anywhere stated in the document. Another F term is the FAS, free alongside ship. This FAS, as a free alongside ship, is similar to the free carrier, the FCA. But this FAS, the free alongside ship, can only be used for sea or inland waterway traffic. Remember we said the FCA, the free carrier, is applicable to all modes of transport. However, the free alongside ship can only be used for sea or inland waterway traffic. The goods must be delivered to the berth or quay alongside a shipping vessel nominated by the buyer or his agent. The buyer takes on the responsibility for getting the goods from the quay side to the vessel, plus all costs and risks after that point. Again, if the buyer cannot carry out export formalities, the FCA, which is free carrier, may be used. We move to the last F term we have here, the FOB, the free on board. This is suitable for conventional cargo. Example, when we break bulk. Conventional cargo shipment sent by sea or inland waterway. For other transport modes, the term FCA, the free carrier, is more appropriate. The seller has responsibility for delivering to the port and vessel nominated by the buyer, and responsibility and risk remains with the seller until the goods have actually passed the ship's rail at the port or shipment. So we're realizing that with these four F terms, the free carrier, the free alongside ship, and the free on board, the three F terms are all such that the seller will undertake all pre-carriage duties, but the main carriage responsibilities or arrangements still remains with the buying organization. Now let's move to the C terms. The first C term we have here is the CFR, cost and freight. CFR. The seller bears the responsibility and cost of delivery from its premises to the port of destination using sea or inland waterway freight. The seller is therefore required to provide all export documents required. However, risk is transferred to the buyer when the goods pass over the ship's rails at the port of shipment, so the cost of marine or marine insurance is borne by the buying organization. The next C term is the CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. Similar to the CFR, which is the cost and freight, but the seller is also responsible for marine insurance. This is to protect the goods against loss or damage during carriage or the named place of destination, like during carriage to the named place of destination. If the buyer requires a higher level of insurance than the supplier will arrange as a standard, then this should be clarified when drawing up the sales contract. We also have the CPT, carriage paid to. So remember, with all the terms after cost, insurance, and freight, you add your name of port or destination. So this one you have the CPT, the carriage paid to. So after saying this, you just add your destination, paid to, so and so, paid to blah blah blah. So that's the next C terms, the carriage paid to, the CPT. This is designed for use with containerized or multimodal transport. Responsibility and cost of transit are borne by the seller up to the point at which the goods are delivered to the place of destination designated in the sales. However, responsibility for insurance is borne by the buyer. The fourth C term we have here, the CIP, carriage paid insurance. Sorry, CIP is carriage and insurance paid to. So similar to CIF, except that the seller also arranges all insurance for transit. So the CIP is similar to the CIF. The carriage and insurance paid to is similar, has similar explanation to cost, insurance, and freight, except that the seller with the CIP, the seller also arranges all insurance for transit. That is, the seller assumes all risks until goods are delivered. Finally, we have the D terms. We have three D terms. The first one is the DAT, delivered at terminal. The seller pays all cost of carriage to the named destination terminal, including taxes and delivery charges, but not including costs related to import clearance. The seller also assumes all risk up to the point at which the goods are unloaded at the terminal. The buyer needs to arrange custom clearance and onward transport. The DAP, which is delivered at place, is the next D term. With this term, the seller pays all cost of carriage to the named place, excluding costs related to import clearance, custom duty, VAT, and so on. The seller also assumes all risk up to the point of which the goods are ready for unloading by the buyer. The buyer carries out all customs formalities unless the contract states otherwise. The final term we have here is the DDP, delivered duty paid . So with this DDP, the delivered paid duty, the seller is responsible for delivering the goods to the named place in the buyer's country, and the seller also pays all costs in bringing the goods to the destination, including all import duties and taxes. If the seller cannot obtain an import license, this term should not be used. So in summary, these are the Incoterms. We have 11 terms in total, 1 E terms, the S work. We have 4 F terms. We have, 3 F terms, 1 E term, 4 C terms, and 3 D terms, which gives us a total of 11 terms, 11 Incoterms. Payment mechanisms. Now we are saying that one person can sit in your country and then the next supplier will also sit in your country, and then we transact. After transacting, how do we pay? How is the supplier assured that if I deliver the goods, the buyer is going to pay? How is the buyer assured that if I pay, the supplier is going to deliver, is going to supply? So we are going to briefly go over some of these payment mechanisms. An overseas supplier may not be entirely confident that it will be paid for goods once the buyer has got hold of them. The seller may be vulnerable because of the distances involved, the risk of international transportation, limited direct contact with the buyer, and the difficulty of conducting payment disputes through different legal jurisdictions. And international trade therefore recognizes the need to protect the seller's position to give exporters some guarantee of payment by their customers. This brings us to the issue of methods of international payment. There are various ways of arranging international payment. We have the open account trading, payment in advance, bills of exchange, and the letters of credit. The open account trading is used when the goods are shipped before payment of the goods are made. So with this type of payment ordinary credit terms where the seller bears the risk of non-payment. This is only used where there is a good level of trust between the buyer and the seller. So definitely if a supplier does not trust you, there is no way it's going to supply the goods to you and expect you to pay later. The next payment method is the payment in advance. This is when the goods are paid in advance. Simple and low risk for the seller, but high risk for the buyer, given the risk of non-delivery or loss of value in transit. We also have the bills of exchange. The bill of exchange is similar to a post-dated check, guaranteeing payment at a defined future date. Example, 90 days from the date of curation. That is a written order requiring the bank to make payment. So the both parties will come into their banks will come into contact. So the buyer's bank will contact the supplier's bank, and then both banks will agree, issuing the bill of exchange documents, saying that probably agreeing that 90 days after or after this period, the buyer's bank is supposed to release or make payments of this amount to this supplier's bank. That's the bill of exchange. We have the letters of credit. This is when the buyer's bank guarantees payment to the supplier once the terms and conditions of the sale contract has been shown to be satisfied. Example, by presentation of a bill of lading or other documentation. So the figure we have here is the typical flow chart for letters of credit. So first one, the exporter and importer will conclude sales with payment arranged by letter of credit. So this moves from the exporter to the importer. You realize the arrow is moving from the exporter through to the importer. Then after this stage, the importer tells issuing bank to provide credit in favor of the exporter. This is moving from the importer to the issuing bank, the importer's issuing bank. Then the importer's issuing bank asks a bank in exporter's country to advise and confirm credit. So this is moving between the two banks, the issuing bank to the advising bank. Then the advising bank will also confirm bank sent credit to the exporter, which is moving from the advising bank to the exporting bank. The first step is when the exporter checks the requirements of the credit and dispatches the goods to the importer. Realize the arrow is moving from the exporter to the exporter's advising bank. Then the exporter presents shipment documents to the advising bank, confirming bank or other bank for payment, acceptance, and negotiation. Then after this, payment or accepting or negotiating bank checks the documents and they pay or check or accept terms under the credit. Then the advising bank will pay or accept or negotiate bank forwards documents to the issuing bank. From this stage, the issuing bank will reimburse the advising bank in pre-arranged manner. Then the importer will issue accounts in pre-bank debit to the importer's account agreed manner. From there, the issuing bank will release documents to the importer. And finally, the importer will use these documents to take delivery of goods. This is how the letters of work works, the process it goes through. So it's between the exporter and the exporter's advising or confirming bank to the issuing bank and the importer itself. In summary, we generally explained the use of Incoterms and payment systems. We defined Incoterms and also highlighted on their purpose. We then looked at the basic structure of Incoterms with detailed explanations. We have also looked at some payment mechanisms. We also highlighted on some methods of international payments. We also emphasized on letters of credit as one of the major types of international payments. Thank you.